Hello everyone, welcome back. This is chapter 12, experiments with more than one independent variable. This does have a lot of information, but a lot of it applies more to stats than just research methods, and so we're not going to go into a ton of depth in a lot of these concepts. I just want to give you enough that you understand why you would use more than one independent variable, what interactions are, and what they mean. So we're going to review very briefly what an experiment with a one independent variable looks like, and then we're going to talk about experiments with two. In general, these are called factorial designs, and so we're going to talk about different ways of doing a factorial design. And then we'll finish by talking about identifying it in the literature. So first, consider this example where we have alcohol intake. This study was looking at whether drunks are mean. And so you had two groups, just a placebo group and a drunk group. And basically, they were given the task to shock somebody. So intensity and duration, and in both cases, the drunk group was meaner than the placebo group. So what this study tells us is that drunks, on average, are going to generally have a higher, they're going to have higher shock intensity and duration of shocks than someone who's not. And we can apply this to other ways where maybe they're just meaner. So experiments are really powerful that way. We can start to talk about what's causing something else. However, the relationship can be more complicated than that. So when we talk about experiments with two independent variables, we're going to talk about what an interaction is and the different ways that you can design experiments with two independent variables. And then at the end, we're going to very briefly talk about how things were interpreted. So when we talk about an interaction, it means the effect of something depends on some other variable. So for example, we're looking at how much you like it. We have ice cream and pancakes. And then the other grouping variables, so the first one is ice cream or pancakes. That's one variable. The other variable is either hot or cold. And so ice cream is generally a lot better when it's cold than when it's hot. So the enjoyment of ice cream depends on whether you're in the hot group or the cold group. Same thing happens with pancakes. The enjoyment of pancakes depends on whether you're in the cold or hot group. So in these cases, the effect of ice cream or pancakes actually depends on whether it's hot or cold. These extreme ones are called crossover interactions. It's when you kind of have an X going on. So it starts low and goes high, and vice versa. Spreading interactions is when they may be similar in one condition, but they spread apart. So in general, regardless of whether it's a crossover or spreading, it just means the effect of one variable depends on what group you are in the other. So there's different factorial designs. So when we talk about a factorial design, we're going to talk about cells, and cells are just the combination of both variables. So if we go back to this, one cell is people that have cold and ice cream right there. Another cell would be hot and ice cream. Another cell would be hot and pancakes, and another one would be cold and pancakes. So each combination of the groups is one cell. So consider this. So you have on cell phone and not on phone. You have young drivers and old drivers. So one variable is this, the other variable is this. So each individual cell, so you have younger drivers on cell phones, older drivers on cell phones. Younger drivers not on phones, older drivers not on phones. So each of these are a cell, and it's a combination of this variable, older, young, and this variable, on a phone or not. So Factorial designs can test the limitations on a variable. So our variable may be on the phone or not on the phone. We may wonder, I wonder if the effect of being on the phone actually depends on whether someone's old or not. And so often the way that we like to look at this is by plotting it, so we can plot this. So in this case, on the cell phone, not on the phone, for older and younger, and the time it takes to break. So in this one, you don't see an interaction happening because the lines are roughly parallel. They go together. If they crossed over or met somewhere, that's an indication of an interaction. In this case, older drivers do take longer to brake in both conditions. So they're higher here than here, and they're higher here than here. And so older drivers are slower, and if you're on the cell phone, it's slower. So both of these groups are higher than both of these groups. So you do have what are called main effects. So there's a difference of young drivers and old drivers, and there's a difference between on the phone and not on the phone. But the effect of being on the phone doesn't depend on if you're young or old. By testing the limits here, it's actually a form of external validity. We can answer the question, for whom does this apply? So if we go back and look at this, the question was, for whom does being on a phone actually hurt braking time? Turns out it's for young and old drivers, the same roughly. But it may not always happen that way. So in this case, the drunk group and placebo group, if you have light men, so not very heavy, and heavier men. And so the effect of being drunk is actually stronger for heavier men than for lighter men. The difference here isn't as big than here. So the difference between the placebo group and the drunk group is a lot stronger for the heavy men. So here you have an interaction because the lines aren't parallel. They're coming together over here. This is showing the same thing, just reversing what's on the x-axis and which one's the lines. Again, it's showing the same thing. There's an interaction happening. The lines are coming together. So the effect of being drunk depends on how heavy you are, is how we would look at that. So factorial designs can test theories. We can actually use a factorial design to test the theory of alcohol cues or anything else that we might think the effect of our intervention may depend on their age, their biological sex, their experience, where they're from, their culture, things like that. So for example, to test the theory of alcohol cues, we can have alcohol photo and plant photo. So people come in, they see a photo with alcohol in it and a photo just with a plant. And then the other variable is aggression-related words and neutral words. So we may wonder what reaction times are in these situations. So the aggressive alcohol photos here, the neutral alcohol photo, neutral plant photo, and aggressive plant photo. So if these are our results, we can say the alcohol photo, when it's aggression-related words, results in faster time than alcohol photo with neutral words. But the opposite is true when there's a plant photo. Neutral words are actually easier to, or faster reaction time, and then aggression-related words are slower. So again, this is a crossover interaction, where the effect of the type of photo depends on the type of words. Another example is looking at the number of items recalled based on participant type, either they're chess experts or they're novices, so child chess expert and adult novice. The other variable is whether they're chess pieces or they're just numbers. So child chess experts do really well at recalling the number of chess pieces. They don't do as well for numbers. Interestingly, adult novices are actually the opposite. They do pretty well with numbers and even worse with chess pieces. So the effect of what type of participant you are, either child chess expert or adult novice, depends on the type of item that is there, on how many numbers you recall. So when it comes to interpreting factorial results, there's a couple ways of doing that. The first is looking at the main effects. Is there an overall difference? So we talked about this earlier on when it came to phone use and whether or not you're old or young on your breaking time. So there were no interactions there, but there were main effects. There was an effect of being old or young. Older took longer to break. And there was also an effect of phone use. People on the phone took longer to break. After that, we showed several interactions. So interactions, the question is there a difference in the differences? So there's a difference for one variable. Is the difference the same for the other? So for example, here, let's do this one. So the difference for cell phone is about this much, so about 200-ish. And an interaction asks, is the difference here the same? Is it about 200? And in this case, it is. For this example, the difference is about 1. And then over here, the difference becomes a little more than 2. So the difference is not the same here to here. So we'll go back. In general, interactions are more important than main effects. If there's an interaction, that's what we want to talk about. We don't want to talk about the main effects when an interaction is there. So consider some examples of these. So the main effect, is there an overall difference? And so this is all asking, is there a difference from here to here? And so what we use here is what's called marginal means. This is not something you need to know super well, but it's just the mean across both levels of the other variable. So the mean for the aggressive group is the mean of 551 and 559, which is 555. For neutral, it's the average of alcohol and plant, which gives us 557. So the difference between these two is 555 to 557, just 2 points difference. Now the marginal means for this one is alcohol. So you take the mean for aggressive and neutral, and we get 556. And for plant, we get 555. And so again, not much of a difference there. So the main effect is the difference between these two, which is just 1 unit, and the difference between these two is 2 units. Consider another example where we have light men and heavy men, that's one variable, and placebo and drunk. So we can look at the main effect of placebo and drunk by taking the mean of here and here together. That's 4.91. And then the mean of 6 and 7.19 is 6.6. So the difference between these is fairly large. The main effect for weight, on the other hand, is 5.5. That's the average of these two, and 5.96, which is the average of these two. And that's the difference of these, not as big. So those are main effects. When it comes to interactions, it's asking, is there a difference in differences? So we can look at this. The difference between these two is 11. So 551, 562, so it's negative 11. For the plant group, the difference is 7. It actually reverses, so it's not only a different size, but this one was negative and this one's positive. So there is an interaction in this case because the difference here is different than the difference here. And we can look at that in this example as well. So there's two ways of showing this. I like the line graphs a lot more, but people will show bar graphs. This bar graph isn't great for a number of reasons, but it's just for clarification that if you see this in an article, that's what it's suggesting. This pattern shows up this way in a bar graph. You can also see this here. This pattern, the non-interaction one, shows up this way in a bar graph. So describing an interaction in words. So for here, the chess pieces and digits are the groups, and then you have child chess experts and the adult novices from before. One way we could say this is child chess experts can remember more chess pieces than digits, but adult chess novices can remember more digits than chess pieces, so there's a reversal there. For this one, we could say something like the drunk group was more aggressive than the placebo group, especially for heavy men. So this group over here, the drunk group, is higher. These two together is higher than these two together. But it's most particularly high for this group, the heavy men. So the drunk group was more aggressive than the placebo group, especially for heavy men. So in general, interactions are more important than main effects. If you find an interaction, you're going to be focusing on the interaction itself, not so much the main effects. If we just look at the main effects, sometimes that can hide important implications from the interaction. That can happen because it can totally hide what is actually happening in the data. All right, so there's number of possible main effects and interactions in a 2x2 factorial. 2x2 just means you have one group that has 2 levels and another group that has 2 levels. So all of these are 2x2s. They're all different situations, just made up data. And so the line graph of the results look like this. All of these are possible in a 2x2. So in this one, we're not going to go into a ton of depth on this, but this one implies that there's no main effect for cell phone and no main effect for age, but there is an interaction. This one suggests that there's a main effect for age. There's a difference across ages here, but there's no difference across cell phone. This one's the opposite. There is a main effect for cell phones, but no main effect for age, and no interaction for either of these because the lines are parallel. And this one, there's a main effect for cell phone, a main effect for age, and an interaction. So if you're confused, you can come back to this chart and look at all these if there's a question on inquisitive. These are all possible situations in a 2x2 factorial. There's others as well. These ones are more subtle. We're not going to go into a lot of depth on these, but again, this situation, you have all of them. This situation, there's no effect. This one, you have a blend, so you have an effect for cell phone, but not for age, and there's an interaction because they do cross. They're not parallel. And then here, you don't have a main effect for cell phone. You do have one for age, and you do have an interaction. So between this one and this one, what I want you to be able to do is look at a graph and see, first of all, if there's an interaction. And then you can always come back to this chart and see, okay, what main effects are there? If you can do that, then you'll do great on the inquisitive assignment. All right, so there are a number of factorial variations. The ones we've focused on so far is just a 2x2. You have 2 levels in one group and 2 levels in the other. But there's others as well. So you have independent groups factorial designs, within groups factorial designs, mixed factorial designs. And then you can have more than just 2 levels of an independent variable. So consider independent groups factorial design. So both IVs are studied as independent groups. So you have different people in each cell of your study. So one cell has a group of people, another cell has a completely different group. So a 2x2 independent groups factorial design has 4 groups / cells, so groups meaning each combination of the groups. And this is known as a between subjects factorial design. So if you want to use this in your proposal, that's what you would call it. On the other hand, you can have within groups factorial designs and mixed designs. So the independent groups looks like this. So you have person 1 through 12 in the alcohol, photo, and neutral words. Then you have a completely different group, 13 through 24 for plant, photo, and neutral words. 25 through 36 for aggression-related words, and then 37 through 48 for plant, photo, and aggression-related words. So total, you need 48 individuals to do this design. On the other hand, within groups, you could do the same 12 in every group. So you could have 1 through 12 here for neutral words and alcohol, photo. Same 12 for plant, photo, and neutral words, etc. All are the same. So you'd only need 12 individuals, but they would need to do 4 conditions. You can also do a mixed design where we have different people for alcohol, photo, and plant photo, so 1 through 12 here and 13 through 24 here. But we have the same people do it for neutral words and aggression words, so 1 through 12 and 1 through 12, 13 through 24, 13 through 24. And so in this one, you need 24 individuals to do it. So in other words, a mixed design is where one IV is manipulated as an independent groups design, and the other is manipulated as a within groups design. It's a combination of the two. Another thing you can do is you can increase the number of levels of an independent variable. So the cell phone one, we could do a hands-free cell phone, a handheld cell phone, and no phone. And maybe there's a difference across these. So this could be the results that come from that. Where hands-free, it does seem to help a little bit. It does go down compared to handheld, but it's nowhere near where the no phone is at. You also could do that with age groups. So instead of just saying old and young, you could do individual groups. You also can increase the number of independent variables, and so we could have 3 independent variables instead of just 2. So we can have the traffic that they're in, how they're using the phone, and their age. So 3 independent variables. So you could have a 3-way design is what these are called. So the question is, why worry about all these interactions? So in this case, you actually see a difference depending on the type of traffic they're in. If they're in heavy traffic, this is the pattern where there's no interaction. So no cell phone impacts younger drivers and older drivers the same way. This one though, no cell phone actually helps older drivers have the same reaction time as the young. So why worry about all these? Well, most outcomes in psychological studies are not main effects, but rather interactions. Humans especially are very complicated. We are influenced by a lot of things, and so usually it's not just there's a simple effect that happens when we do something. It usually depends on other things. So for example, in this, it could depend on the traffic we're in and our age. This is very normal in psychology. So when it comes to actually finding this in your articles that you're reading, there's some clues that we can look for. So first, in the method section, if it has some factorial notation, so it says like 2 by 3 by 2, that's suggesting that it's a 3-level factorial design. Often the results section will examine whether there's a main effect and interactions were significant. So you'll want to look for any talk of interactions, or another term for it is moderation. If you see interaction or moderation, that's a hint that they used a factorial design and they're looking at interactions. In the popular press, you look for words like "it depends." So the effect of this variable depends on, or the effect, or this effect only happens when, or the effect for whom it helps, or this treatment helps certain people. Those are clues to say there's probably interactions happening there. There's also things to look for in participants. So age, gender, ethnicity, those things are often used as moderators, as interaction variables. So it may be like what we saw with the cell phone, that the effect of cell phones may depend on or don't depend on age. So that was a brief introduction to interactions and factorial designs. If you want to use this in your study, please reach out to me. We can talk about ways to make it work well for you and how you can talk about it in your document. It's a very strong approach, and it's a very interesting one if you do want to apply it, so please reach out.